Hey guys, this is your girl Lyra from Self Reflection Podcast. Today, I want to talk about this video that I saw on TikTok. This young African lady was talking about the fact that she's from Zimbabwe, and she was saying that she doesn't feel oppressed, or she was never oppressed when she was in Zimbabwe. But when she moved to the UK, she felt as if black people were forcing her, or other people in general was forcing her to feel oppressed, or say she was oppressed in Zimbabwe or oppressed in the UK, but she doesn't feel that way, which that is correct. Even though oppression and marginalization and suppression does happen, and it is still happening in this moment with the current systems that we have, it doesn't mean her feelings aren't valid, right? We still have to validate what she's feeling. But when it comes down to the grand scheme of, oppression and suppression and marginalization in Africa and with the black people all over the world, it's still taking place systematically, right? After watching this video, I think there's this misunderstanding or misconception that Africans are not oppressed, or we are not oppressed in Africa. We're not marginalized in Africa. We have, slavery doesn't happen in Africa. And, people in Africa and black people all over the world should move past slavery already. I'm not saying that, individuals are racist or individuals are suppressing one another. No, I think it's systematically. And today I'm going to talk about 3 ways that happened in Africa. To be precise, I am only going to be talking about what is happening in Africa and how Africans are oppressed, suppressed, and marginalized. Also, how slavery is still taking place in Africa, because when she said what she said, I comment on this video. I believe I said something along this line. She probably didn't feel oppressed because she didn't understand when she was in Zimbabwe. She didn't understand what oppression was. So you can't tell if you're oppressed if you don't know what oppression is, and I think that is the case for many Africans. Especially those in the diaspora, right? When I was in Africa, I didn't know what oppression was. I didn't know what marginalization was. I didn't know what suppression was. I also didn't really know much about slavery. So that didn't impact me, because what you don't know cannot hurt you. What you don't know isn't relevant to your life. So I think that is the case with many Africans that moved to a European country or the US or anywhere else in the world other than Africa, right? When we leave the motherland and move to a different country, we experience different things, and now we can see different things. And that is why I want to make this video, because I think there's a little bit of misunderstanding there, and also, there's a little bit of denial there that oppression and suppression still happen in Africa. And I also want to add that because I have been in Africa, and because I know what it's like to live in Africa, and I know what it's like to live in a foreign country, which is where I am today, I can tell the difference with the system, right? And I can tell today how people in Africa are still being used as props, right? I can tell that people in Africa are still being suppressed and oppressed, are still being marginalized, are still being used for their natural minerals and resources, right? And today I want to talk about 3 ways, like I mentioned. The first way that I'm going to talk about how Africans are still being oppressed and being marginalized and being taken advantage of is the school system in Africa. The school system in Africa is messed up because the public school aren't free. But, when you go to public school, you still have to pay some type of fee. And also the textbooks that we use in our classroom in Africa are not written by Africans. It's not written, solely based on African history and what has occurred in Africa. The textbook really explores the European country more than anything. I believe when I was in Cameroon, I learned about gold rush. And I learned about gold rush. I knew about California before I even knew my neighboring country. I didn't even know there was gold in Africa. I didn't know we produce gold in Africa. But I knew about gold rush. I thought California was the place that produces gold. But I did not know we actually produce gold in Africa. So the education system is definitely a way that Africans are being suppressed, because we are not being told the truth, the right history, what actually happened in Africa, and we are not being educated, based on what we have and what our people have been through. So that is a form of oppression. That is a form of marginalization. That's a form of control, which the European Union and the Europe countries do really well. For any Africans that have been wondering, how am I oppressed? How is the Europe still having an impact in Africa? The education system is one of the ways that, Europe keeps their hands on Africa and keeps control of Africa. The second way that I want to talk about is the money. Most countries in Africa, especially the countries in Central and West Africa, most of those countries do not print their own money, which means that they do not have control over their money. That is another form of oppression, and that is another form of suppression, and that is another form of marginalization. Also, a person in Africa working a full-time job, I would even say working 10 hours a day, makes roughly $25 to roughly $50 a month. That is how low the currency value is in Africa. So I don't see how this is not modern day slavery in my eyes. I see this as a way where the Europe and the European Union and the Western world is definitely, making sure that Africa is staying under the current existence. By controlling the money in Africa, it means you control the economy. I think this is definitely one of the ways that Europe and the European Union has kept control of Africa for decades. The question that comes in my mind is, why can't African leaders say no to European Union? The ones that are still partaking with Europe in this manner, the ones that are still allowing Europe to print their money, why can't we say no? That's the part I am still confused about, because we have the resources. We have the minerals to buy ourselves out of debt, if that is the concern there. And I want to just say, telling African countries the reason why Europe is still in charge of them, the reason why Europe has so much control and so much power over them, is because they're in debt and they cannot pay their debt. That, to me, is BS. Why? Because if you look at US is in trillions of dollars in debt. Trillions. Like 36 trillions in debt. So you cannot tell me that an African country is still stuck under the European Union, allowing countries like France to print the money because they are in debt. African leaders, you cannot tell me that that's why we continue to allow Europe to print our money. and Europeans or European Union, you cannot tell me that in this way, by the way, the reason why you still have your hands on Africa in this way is because they are in debt. You cannot tell me that, because I say that is BS. Because if that was the case, France should be in trouble as well. 50% of France's economy relies on Africa. 50% of France's economy, maybe more. If African countries did not support France, if France didn't take from Africa, they will be actually a third world country. They would be bankrupt right now. So we can't say that the reason why we continue to allow France and other countries in Europe to print our money is because we are in debt. We owe them something. African leaders, we must wake up in this area. This is one of the main reasons why Africa has not developed. I know there's corruption in Africa. I'm not naive to that. But the currency is the biggest corruption that is happening in Africa. The currency is what is keeping Africa where it is. Take, for instance, the new technology world, right? We are moving into a new technology world where cryptocurrency is the new thing. For instance, if the people in the village in Africa do not have electricity, therefore they do not have technology. If they do not have technology or electricity, how are they supposed to participate in the cryptocurrency market? How are they supposed to grow their economy if they're not able to participate in what is actually allowing the economy to boom these days? Africans and African leaders, this is the time for us to grow. This is the time for us to move forward. This is the time for us to uplift one another. This is a time for Africa to come together. We have enough minerals like vibranium. We have the youths, we have the skills, we have the drive in Africa to build Africa into the countries and continent that we want to see. We are able to do that. The third thing that I want to talk about is the elections that take place in Africa. Not just long ago, the European Union found itself in Nigeria, I believe last month, the last election that just happened. The European Union seems to always find itself in Africa whenever there's an election. They call themselves Election Observation Mission. I cannot make this up. I cannot make this up. The European Union made up a little organization and called themselves Election Observation Mission, where they go into Africa during the election time and make sure that they pick the right candidate that's best suitable for them. They pick the right candidate that's a sheep. Make sure that will do everything that they want. I cannot make this up. It's sad. It is sad. It is sad to see that even in the 21st century, African leaders, you are allowing this to happen. Like, how? How did we get here? Obviously, we know how we got here. But why aren't we trying to move forward, African leaders? We can say no. Seriously, you have the power to say no to the European Union. You have the power to say no to the Election observation mission. I don't remember Africa ever going into Europe to conduct election observation mission. I don't. And there's corruption in Europe. There's corruption in America. Why aren't the election observation mission in the election in the United States? Why? Why don't I see them parked in the United States during election time? They say they go into Africa to make sure that it is a democratic election. It's fair. For who? That is the question. Fair for who? Because obviously it's not fair if you look at how the people in Africa has been living. Fair for who, my friend? Take for instance Cameroon. The Cameroonian president has been in power for roughly 40 years. Fair for who? What type of democracy is that? Please, somebody tell me. The European Union, please answer this question. What kind of democracy are you talking about when you allow a president to be in power for 40 years? Is that democracy? Is that fairness? African leaders, on behalf of the youth of Africa, I beg of you, we beg of you, if you guys are not tired of Europe controlling Africa for the most part, if you guys are not tired of being a third world country, if you are not sick of seeing people live the way they do in Africa, the youth of Africa are tired. They are tired of feeling as if there's no hope. You know? The youth of Africa go to school. They go to doctorate school. Come out and become Okada driver. Okada driver is a bicycle driver. That's what they end up being. The youths of Africa go get a PhD, go get a nursing degree, go become lawyers, come back home and cannot get a job, end up being taxi drivers, end up being thieves in the community because they don't have jobs. The youth in Africa are sick of losing friends and family members day in, day out in car accident because the roads are hideous. The youth of Africa are tired and are in pain because they are not able to pay for their parents to get proper medical care. The youth of Africa are tired of having to bribe the system day in, day out just to get a job. African leaders, the youth of Africa are speaking to you right now. I don't want to be disrespectful, but if your old, tired self is not tired of allowing Europe to ruin Africa, the youth of Africa are tired. Roughly 75% to 80% of the population in Africa is made up of youths. Wake up. Wake up, Africa. Wake up. We don't want to be slaves anymore. We understand the system right now is enslaving us, but we are tired of being slaves. We are tired of being slaves. So many people talk about slavery ended years ago. Where? Please tell me where. In Congo? You mean the thousands of people that have to lose their lives day in, day out? To dig up minerals for Elon Musk to have his Tesla factory booming? You mean that place where people make $1 a day working 8-hour shifts? Is that the slavery that is over? Because I don't think that's slavery that's over. I just think it's slavery that changes its shape, its form, and size. That's what I think. You know? If you're watching this video and you do not think it's your responsibility to move the society forward, not just Africa, move the entire society forward, then you're part of the problem. There's just saying that goes, if you don't stand for something, you fall for anything. If you don't stand for something, you will fall for anything. So yes, there is oppression in Africa. Yes, there is suppression in Africa. Yes, there is marginalization in Africa. Yes, there is modern day slavery in Africa. Yes, I will say that one again. There is modern day slavery in Africa happening right now. African leaders, we are sick. The youth of Africa are sick of watching the rest of the world move forward and them slaving away. Why do we choose to continue to allow people to have control over us? Why do we choose to continue to be second-class citizens when we are literally bending over backwards for the entire world? The future is in our hands, Africa. This world depends on Africa. The future is in our hands, and they know it. This entire galaxy knows that Africa is the future. That is why Europe is fighting over Africa right now. That is why the US is trying to make sure that it keeps its partnership with Africa. And that is why China is heavily investing in Africa right now. Heavily. But you know what? I actually would say this. At least the Chinese people or the Chinese government or system has dignity to make fair trades with Africa. You know, at least the Chinese have a somewhat of partnership interest to work with Africa. But Europe, based on the history and what is actually going on right now, I don't think they have the best interests for Africa. So African leaders, are we standing up? Are we going to stand up? Africans, are we going to stand up and fight for our people? We have to see ourselves as valuable. I think because of how the system has been set up, Africans have not seen themselves as worthy. That's my opinion. I think because we have always been suppressed, I think because we have always been oppressed, we have not seen ourselves as valuable. But it is time we see ourselves as important. It is time we see ourselves as key players in the economic system. It is time Africa take a step forward. We must grow in Africa. Must grow. And I before I come to an end with this video, I want to tell every single African youth out there that I am so proud of you guys. I am so proud of every single African out there, especially those in the motherland. You guys literally motivate me daily to keep going. You guys give me strength when I don't have strength, because I know what you are going through. I see it every single day. I talk to people in Africa. And I am proud of you. I am proud of every single African. Every single one of us. I am proud of us. There's so much fire in our eyes. There's so much growth in us. And I see that in us. I see that we want change in Africa. We want freedom in Africa. We want liberation in Africa. I see it in us. And shout out to all the African musicians, man, who are running this industry everywhere. Man, Africa and Africans, let's go. Let's go. Africans everywhere, let's go. Africans in the diaspora, Africans in the motherland, keep pushing, keep fighting, keep motivating one another, keep striving for the best, because we deserve the best of the best. We deserve to compete with the rest of the world. We deserve to show off our skills. We deserve to have rights. I have lived in Africa and I have lived in the Western world. There are two different worlds. I'm not saying we need to fall into the Western world's trap of how they live their lives, but we deserve financial freedom just like people all over in the Western world. We deserve to live a life of abundance just like anyone else. And we need to see ourselves as valuable, because we are. This world depends on our agriculture. This world depends on our minerals. This world is looking forward to the African youths to carry it on. Let's go, Africans. Let's go. This is the 21st century. We must let the world know we're here. The world should know Africans are here. Slavery is not where we want to be. Slaves is not what we are. Slaves are not who we are. We are not slaves, and we refuse to be slaves. We need our leaders. We need leaders in Africa. African leaders, we are looking forward to the European Union dismissing itself in the African election. We know the track history. We know why they're there. And this is no theory. This is no, oh, Europe is taking over Africa, X, Y, and Z. No. I am proud of Africa. Africa is a beautiful place. If you've never been, go check it out. It's a beautiful place. Despite all that is going on in Africa, despite the oppression, the marginalization, the indirect slavery that is happening in Africa, Africa is a beautiful place. If you have an opportunity to go ahead and check it out. I too myself would love to go back home anytime soon. Thank you guys so much for listening to Self-Reflection Podcast. If this is your first time coming across Self-Reflection Podcast, you can find it on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, Overcast, and the link is on my Instagram bio. You can also connect with me on Instagram and on TikTok at Lira, Lira_NDIFON. Again, that is Lira, Lira_NDIFON. Follow me, send me a DM if you wish to say hello. To my dear Africans, together we shall overcome. Together we will overcome. Together we will move forward. Together we will uplift one another. And together we will struggle. I hope you have a blessed day. Take care of yourself, love yourself, be kind, and be gentle with yourself. Until next time, you're listening to Self-Reflection Podcast. And this is your girl, Lira. Ta-da!